Hey y'all, it's Megan, and in this video we are sewing the Paris Palazzo pants. I'm sewing up this simple pant with the optional inseam pocket that you see here. There's also a video on the drawstring waistband with simple short, and then we have this really fun gathered side panel pant, and I will link both of those tutorials down below. If you're doing the pocket, then the first step is going to be to take one pocket piece and place it right sides together with one front leg along the side seam. And you are going to align the sides and the top, and then you are going to sew directly along that marking on your pocket piece. If your fabric is super lightweight, then you might want to add a little piece of interfacing here, just a rectangle, to help give it some stability. After you sew this directly on that marking, again, there's no seam allowance there, then you're going to trim this seam to reduce the bulk. And I like to cut into each corner like this and then trim away. If your fabric is fraying like really bad every time you're cutting it, then you might want to use pinking shears here. I did this tutorial with a cotton woven, so it had a really nice front and back, so it obviously is not fraying. Then take it to your ironing board and press that pocket back toward the wrong side, and you are going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the pocket opening along all three sides. Once you have it all top stitched, then you are going to take another pocket piece and you are going to place it right sides together with your pocket, and you're going to align all of the raw edges on the top and the curve. And you are going to stitch your two pocket pieces together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you're stitching them together along that bottom curve and on the inside. Once you have that stitched, then you need to finish that seam. You can either use your sewing machine and a zigzag or overcast stitch, or I'm going to use my serger so that that does not fray. Then you are going to repress your pocket so that the top of the pocket aligns with your pants, and you are going to baste the pocket at the side seam and along the top, and then repeat all of those steps with your other front leg and pocket pieces. Next, you are going to place your front and back legs right side together, and you are going to stitch them from the top waist all the way down to the hem, creating the side seam. And you are going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. After you stitch your seam, again, you need to finish this either with a zigzag or your serger. This is optional, but I really like to go ahead and finish my bottom hem. I just use my serger and I don't cut anything off. I'm just using this to finish the bottom. And then I create a memory press by pressing a 1/2 inch to the wrong side. Now, if you don't have a serger, you can also create a narrow hem memory press by pressing a 1/4 inch to the wrong side and then another 1/4 inch to the wrong side. I don't actually hem it yet. This makes it easier than trying to press the pants in the round later. Next, you are going to sew the inseam. So again, you have your front and back leg with right sides facing each other, and you are going to stitch them together from the crotch curve down to the hem. If you did that memory press, then make sure it is unpressed. You don't want to sew it up. You are using a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. And again, once you sew this seam, you are going to need to finish the edge with a zigzag, overcast, or your serger. You are going to repeat these steps with your other front and back leg pieces, making sure that you're creating an opposite leg. Once you are done, you are going to flip one leg inside out and you're going to leave one leg wrong side out. You are going to stick the right side leg inside of the wrong side out leg so that they are right sides together. And you're going to pin them together along the crotch curve, making sure to nest the inseam seam. And you're going to stitch them together from the back all the way to the top along the crotch curve. Again, you are using a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, and once you have sewn the crotch seam, then you need to finish it with a zigzag, overlock stitch, or your serger. You can flip your pants right side out and just set them aside while we work on our waistband. You're going to put your front and back waistband pieces right sides together, and you are going to sew them together at each short end using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Because this seam is enclosed, you can either just press this seam open or you can still finish it with your serger if you would like. Then you are going to fold the waistband in half so they are wrong sides together and place a pin at the center front and center back waistband. Then with right sides together, you're going to pin your waistband to your pants. You're going to match the center front waistband to the center front seam. The side seams of the waistband and pants should also match. And then the back center waistband to the back center seam on your pants. And you're going to stitch the waistband to your pants using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you also need to leave an opening so we can thread our elastic. Leave a 2 to 3 inch opening just unsewn so we can thread our elastic through the waistband. You are going to grab either a bodkin or a safety pin, whatever you want to use, and your elastic, and you are going to use that opening to start threading the elastic all the way from one side to the other. Once you have the elastic pulled through, you are going to overlap the two ends of the elastic by 1/2 inch, and you are going to use a stretch stitch to sew them together. I like to sew a little rectangle around the edges to hold in place. Then you need to stitch close that opening we left. So pull the elastic tight and through as you're stitching and go back and stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure not to catch that elastic in the seam. And then we need to finish the entire waist seam again with a serger or a zigzag or overlock stitch. Then you want to make sure that your elastic is evenly distributed through your waistband before the next step. So just take your time to adjust, make sure that the elastic is straight, and tug it a few times to make sure the gathers are even. Then you need to use a stretch stitch to stitch directly on the markings on your waistband piece. I like to use a longer triple stitch here. You are going to be stretching the elastic so that the fabric is flat as you're doing this. If you don't stretch your elastic straight, then this will pop when you put it on, these stitches will. So just make sure to use a stretch stitch again and pull the elastic as you're stitching. And you're going to stitch both rows on your waistband. If you are doing the plain waistband without the drawstring, like I'm doing here, and you don't love the look of the stitch elastic, you don't have to do this. I personally prefer it so that the elastic doesn't move around while I'm wearing it. You could also just stitch in the ditch at the side seams to hold the elastic in place if you don't love this look. After I have both of those stitch lines finished, I do like to take it to my ironing board and give it a nice press just to make sure everything looks good. And the last step is going to be to hem your pants. Of course, you can try them on first and make sure that you're happy with the length. There is a 1/2 inch hem allowance included in the pattern. You can always adjust that to your liking. Again, I like to serge the edge and then press up the 1/2 inch. You could also create a narrow hem by pressing a 1/4 inch to the wrong side and then another 1/4 inch to the wrong side. Once you have your pants hemmed, then your Paris palazzos are complete. I hope that you love them. As always, if you have any questions, then leave them down below and I will try to answer them. If you make a pair, then we would love to see them. You can post them in our Facebook group or tag me on Instagram at Made for Mermaids, hashtag Made for Mermaids Patterns, hashtag Paris Pattern.